As much as I love Magic the Gathering, there's a lot of decks I've failed to properly enjoy, and I've made the video about Marvo and why it didn't quite work for me, and I think it's worth it to actually talk about these other decks that I've built. I got really excited to build, and then subsequently kind of fizzled out on, because there is a lot to learn, and I want to promote these decks being played ultimately, but I think that there are some people who wouldn't enjoy these kinds of decks. So maybe we make anti-deck tech a thing, right? Maybe we actually go out there and be like, hey, this is a deck I didn't enjoy. This is the kind of player that I am. And maybe you won't enjoy it either, or maybe you would, and me bitching about it is actually going to promote you playing it. So I don't like solitaire games. I don't like when I'm not interacting with my opponents. I actually found that I really enjoy interactive control decks. I like when my cards affect what my opponents are doing. It's a big part of why I fell into group hug play, is because in every single turn, I'm doing stuff that interacts with what my opponents are doing. Group hug is an inherently interactive form of play, and you know what, I'm even probably here soon going to talk about the newest group hug precon, which is just a straightforward control deck. But solitaire games are ones that kind of bother me when I'm just building up my own value engine or whatever. That can be fun. There are value engines that are a lot of fun. I am going to be talking about a deck that is just a fun value engine for me to build up on my own and then start interacting out from there. But when a deck starts sort of playing on its own side of the table and not terribly interacting with its opponents, it can be terribly unfun. And this is where I have to talk about a Bloomborough card I got genuinely, just stupidly excited for, why I got excited for it, and like how it sort of ultimately fell out of favor for me. And I am going to talk about Alania the Divergent Storm. Alania is just such an amazingly designed card. She is fantastic. This is a legendary creature, otter, wizard from Bloomborough. It costs 1 red, 1 blue, and 3 mana. For a 3/5, whenever you cast a spell, if it is your first instant, your first sorcery, or your first otter other than Alania you've cast this turn, you may have target opponent draw a card. If you do, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is such an incredible design. Like, this is how you build like a group hug storm thing, and she gives you an option for like draw go control, where like, you know, I'm going to bolt this creature, I'm going to let you draw a card, I'm going to bolt a second creature. Absolutely fantastic stuff going on here. And I actually didn't realize that she said other than Alania, so you can even do Coruscation Mage copies on the turn that you play her if you have an additional 5 mana to, you know, run out the double Coruscation Mage, which is a really cool thing if you're unaware. Offspring is an additional cost that effectively adds text to the card, which means when you copy a Coruscation Mage using its Offspring effect, you're going to get 4 total Coruscation Mages. That's 2/1 Coruscation Mages, 2/1/1 Coruscation Mages, because it adds the text when this creature enters the battlefield. Create a 1/1, or create a copy that is a 1/1 base power. Anyway, this card is fascinating, and I went through and I was like, okay, I'm going to do like a storm combo thing with Alania, and specifically, I wanted to find a blue or a red card that was not a counterspell that said target player, it had the gifting ability, and I'm just going to show the card. So that has the gift a card text written on it, because the way gifting works is if you gift a card to a specific player, every copied instance will effectively have the text, not target player draws a card, but this player draws a card. So if I gift a card to Tom, or we'll use magic names. If I gift a card to the Marvo player, then effectively Wildfire Howl here says the Marvo player draws a card, and then the rest of its text, which is fascinating to me, because this means you can sort of, while storming off, incidentally force a player to draw out their library, which is very funny to me. This is my ideal way of running sort of group hug cards. If you've seen me talk about Folio Fancies or Descent into Avernus, you'll know this is how I group hug, by overwhelming an opponent with value while doing some removal style stuff and so on. This is a fascinating commander and card combination, because Alania, of course, does inherently lend herself to a sort of storm combo win. And if you're going to do storm, well, you can run cards that natively have storm. However, you could always add a storm enabler, like Thousand Year Storm. Thousand Year Storm, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you copy it for every other instant and sorcery you've cast before it this turn. What an amazing card. This is pseudo Storm. So Thousand Year Storm is a worse version of Storm, because you're only copying it for every instant and sorcery, and for every card, every instant and sorcery you've cast. You have to have cast that instant and sorcery, which is where the next one comes in. There's a better version of it, which is Raw Crackling Wit. So Raw Crackling Wit is a blue, a red, and 2 for Legendary Planeswalker Rawl. This is Rawl as an otter. This is a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, so he comes down on parity with his loyalty. He has a native special ability, native special ability, which is sort of Planeswalker prowess, if you would. When you cast a non-creature spell, you put a loyalty counter on Rawl. So what he's going to ask you to do is he's going to ask to come down, and then you have your counterspell backup, and you also have your Brainstorm, Preordains, all of that, because his first 2 abilities do not matter on this card. The Create an Otter, fantastic. What a good ability. Get him up to 5, create an Otter. We're not here for that. -3, draw 3 cards, discard 2. Fantastic. This is a great draw spell. 4 mana, draw 3, discard 2. That's like, it's fine at the rate of 4 for like a modal spell that does that, but we're never using this ability, because what we want is that -10. We want to cast 6 more spells the turn he comes down, and yes, we have to cast, not copy them. This is not, I don't remember which roll it is, whatever, but -10, draw 3, then you gain an emblem. Instant sorceries you control have Storm. This is actual Storm. This is the real one. So, Storm is, whenever you cast this instant and sorcery, you'll create a copy of it for every other spell cast this turn. It could be a Planeswalker, a creature, an enchantment, just anything. It could be anything. And this is what makes it so fun and interactive, because you don't have to be the person casting those spells. If I cast a Preordained and my opponent counterspells it, the Storm count is now 2. This is such a ridiculously powerful effect. It has been banned a lot of times, but Storm just keeps getting printed. And this gives any spell you want Storm. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to build this cool Storm deck. It's going to like give my opponents a card draw and stuff like that. And that sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? If there was a Vision Skein style card that was like a 2 red and 1, give all opponents 2 treasures, something like that, or give all players 2 treasures, that'd be a fantastic use for this deck, and how it would play out, because you're just constantly doing exponential value stuff. It would be fantastic. And originally, my plan with this deck was I wanted to do a Owling Mine deck, which is a deck I do plan on talking about eventually. I actually have gotten help from a couple of friends working on that video. But effectively, it is a deck that wants you to draw your opponents a bunch of cards and then play Punisher cards for like hand size. So sudden impact deals damage to a player equal to the number of cards in their hand. This is fantastic. That's one of the things I wanted to do with this deck. However, what I ended up sort of going with was generic good stuffy cards, and that is where the Alania deck fell apart. Because originally I was like, okay, I'll put a bunch of 1 and 2 drops in there and they'll get exponentially better and better and better. And that deck didn't really work out so well. It wasn't really that fun or interactive. However, when I finally said, you know what, I'm going to put some big mana spells in here, I put in Hit the Motherload. Now, if you if you preordain Opt, Brainstorm, Hit the Motherload, when Storm's enabled, what's going to happen is you're going to cast Hit the Motherload 4 times. Hit the Motherload is 3 red and 4 for a sorcery that says Discover 10. If you're not familiar with it, Discover is, in order to discover, you'll exile cards on the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value X or less. In this case, X is 10, so mana value 10 or less. And then Hit the Motherload has a second ability on it. You will create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference. That is the difference between that card's mana value and 10. And let me tell you, there are a lot of cards that do not cost 10 mana. What a ridiculous thing to storm off with. I'm going to get 4 copies of Hit the Motherload. Okay, my first spell is like an Opt, Preordain, whatever. And then my second one's like, I don't know, you could hit any number of things. And even if you hit big mana spells, I mean, this is your second or third time going through it. Not to mention, those spells are getting cast. So, I cast Opt, it's getting stormed out. It increases the storm count. It increases the 1,000-year storm count. And there are other cards we could be using and casting here as well, such as, I don't know, Blatant Thievery. Imagine giving Storm to Blatant Thievery. Blatant Thievery is 3 blue and 4 colorless mana for a sorcery that says for each opponent, gain control of target permanent that player controls. Oh my god. Blatant Thievery is probably one of the most rude cards I've ever put into a deck, especially a Storm deck, where it's like, I've cast 4 or 5 different spells, and now I'm literally just taking your entire board. I'm taking 5 permanents every player controls, and putting it into play under my control. And I'm probably taking Mana Rocks. Why am I taking Mana Rocks? Because I want to be able to storm more spells off of my Theft. This went from being a cute little Alania group hug, like Owling Mine Storm deck, to being a Theft Storm deck. And that was ultimately what killed it, because there are 2 problems with this deck. The first one is that people don't like having their stuff stolen, but that's not even a big problem. You cast Blatant Thievery, you take one thing, it's fucking whatever. You know, you're denying your opponent's resources and you're gaining resources yourself. That's fantastic. That's actually really, really fun and can create a nice interactive experience where, like, you're not 1-for-1ing yourself anymore. By removing something, you're like 2-for-1ing almost. You know, you're going up in resource. You're spending a card to gain, in the case of Blatant Thievery, 3 cards, and your opponents are each losing 1 thing. So the exchange is much more like parallel when it comes to removal. But then you give it Storm. Storm's it's fun. It's so fun to play. It's so goddamn fun and cool and goofy to play a Storm deck. But, like, when you cast your 3rd, 4th, 5th spell on a turn, that's when your opponents are just, like, picking up their phone, checking their email, checking on Facebook, just, oh, what random fucking porn site or whatever can I be looking at instead of watching this guy wank off in front of me? Because that's what Storm is. It's a solitaire game. And that's sad. Like, I want my opponents to see the shit I'm doing and be like, oh shit, the boss music just kicked in. But instead they're like, oh, okay, the game's over. It's just going to take 5 more turns to actually complete, isn't it? Because you've put Storm on a Blatant Thievery. I could possibly still win, but, like, you put Storm on a Blatant Thievery. How am I supposed to interact with that? And that was ultimately the thing that killed Elenia for me was I put Storm on a Blatant Thievery, or I put Storm on Hit the Motherload, and I cast a lot of spells in a turn, but I wasn't actually ending out the game. I did have win conditions in that deck. They were all fireballs. It was like Comet Storm and stuff like that, Jaya's Emulating Inferno and whatnot, because, like, that's a fun way to win. You just fireball everybody at the table. That's funny. But it was ultimately the thing that sort of killed the deck, was that it was a Storm deck that didn't really end in value. Now, am I saying that Elenia is a bad commander? Obviously not. You hear, I'm getting very excited. And I love Storm. I really like Storm. I actually have another Storm deck that does do the, oh shit, the boss music just kicked in thing when it starts to storm off. All my opponents are then locked in. They're paying attention, and that's the thing that I want when I play a Storm deck. I want, when I start to storm off, my opponents to go, I'm locked in. I'm going to have to interact with this. I need to do something about this at the table. Because it's been consistent the whole time that I've been playing a control strategy in order to get to my Storm combo turn. And that's the thing that sort of made Elenia sort of miss for me, was that I guess she was a level of inconsistent in being a Storm deck, even if she was consistently copying her own spells and everything. I love Elenia. I think she is one of the coolest commanders out there. And look at her, she's a cute little otter. Like, I love otters. They're one of my favorite animals. And this was an otter deck. You could do Otter Storm with her if there were enough otters in the game. But, like, I don't know. She just sort of made the game unfun for my opponents, and that sucked. I don't like that. I don't want my opponents to check out of the game at any point. I want every play to feel impactful and interactive, and that was ultimately what killed Elenia. I'm sad. I'm sad about this, because, like, I don't know. I want Elenia to be fun. I might still build the Owling Mine thing. We'll have to see. I've been rambling for like fucking almost 20. Oh my god, almost 18 minutes about this deck, because I love Storm. I love storming off. I actually, anytime red and blue are in a deck, I can't stop building Storm. I can't help myself. I see red, I see blue, and I'm like, obviously it's a Storm deck. And there will be builds for Storm decks on my Mox field. If you're interested in what I consider a fun Storm deck, look at Chaos Wand. It's such a fun Storm deck. And I will be making a video about Chaos Wand eventually. But yeah, I've been rambling enough, so I'm gonna get going. Bye.